All right, back of another power rankings tier list midway through the season here. Kind of. There's still a game tonight, but other than that, we are midway through the season. Week 9 here. So let's get into it. You see, there's already 6 teams on the board. 4 of those were bye-week teams. 2 of those played or will play tonight. So that's why they're on the list. And if you're curious as to how they got there, check out last week's video. But yeah. Let's get into the list. I mean, the Titans, just due to how this is formatted, always start off and still have no reason to be anything but in the bad tier. They even got a defensive touchdown, a special teams touchdown. Ultimately, it was enough to get them to cover this game, but they were competitive because of that for a bit. But just nothing going offensively for the Titans, even with a special teams and defensive touchdown. Just it's not enough here. It's a rough situation. Again, it's hard to evaluate Cam Ward right now with the situation. At a certain point, you're going to want to see something. But again, it's just tough right now. Miami, who after their big win, I bumped them up to the what are you tier. I think they're back down to scrappy. It feels like they have enough. Like Tua and Jalen Waddle will win them some games. Again, we'll see how long the roster stays the same as they kind of fired their GM, maybe in part to get someone who's at least willing to deal some of these players. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, you could talk me into bad. They have had some impressive games here, but when they look bad, it looks awful. It looked awful against Baltimore. The Bengals, who... Again, I had them in scrappy last week. I'll keep them there. I mean, you have the Joe Flacco-led offense of throwing up to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Not the worst strategy in the world. Ultimately, though, this defense, I mean, they look like the team we thought they would be going into the year. Obviously, the Burrow injury has impacted things and all that stuff. But still, I mean, if you can't play defense, not going to win a lot of games and really kind of let a couple just slip through their fingers, they would have been, really the Flacco trade would have saved their season if they just could cover a little bit here defensively, but they can't, so this is where they are. Jacksonville, who wins a tight one against the Raiders, a team that I'll keep in a solid tier. I had them there. I think Travis Hunter's injury hurts, especially defensively. I think that hurts. You saw the Raiders have some success. Brock Bowers is just a menace. We'll talk about him when we talk about him, but, again, it is hard to win games in the NFL. Yes, that was a bit too tight for your liking. A 1-point overtime victory, which I'm trying to think, is that the first ever 1-point overtime victory? It probably has to be, right? Because of the new rules. So that's an interesting little tidbit there. So it's interesting. You still want more in the passing game. It was not the best game, but I'm not going to bump you down on a win. We'll keep them in solid, but maybe a little bit, maybe stock dropped a little bit here. Detroit Lions, who they drop one to Minnesota. They now have 3 losses on the year. A team that when the Lions look good, they look really good. So I'm in between. Do I want to bump them down to dark horse? 5-3 is not the record of usually a top tier team. They didn't look too competitive against Kansas City. They didn't look too competitive against Green Bay. They looked competitive but lost this game. It is a divisional matchup. Granted, they have some impressive wins. That Tampa Bay game was very impressive. The Baltimore game was very impressive. The Chicago game, very impressive. So I'm going to keep them in Super Bowl contenders. Maybe I'm holding on too much, but just because they've had a couple losses, I don't think this is enough for me to drop them down, but I am considering it. I really am. Minnesota. Well, then I got to bump Minnesota up then if I'm not bumping Detroit down. They were in what are you? They're definitely at least solid as of right now. We'll see what we get out of J.J. McCarthy from this point forward, but I thought he played very well in this game. They got that big Dave Montgomery turnover that they needed. Were able to get enough stops defensively. And, which going into this, I did not think the defense would be able to hold up against this Lions offense, and it did. Yes, the Lions have injuries in their secondary, but also offense made plays for Minnesota. So, yeah, give them a lot of credit. And the 49ers, who I'm going to keep in the solid tier. They still have these injuries, but it feels like every now and then they have these, rough game. They've been weird, right? Beat the Giants by 10, looks confident. Lose to the Texans by a bunch 2 weeks ago. beat the Falcons, look confident, lose to Tampa Bay in a game they were in, but still they lose that game. But then they beat the Rams in overtime previously. So I don't know. They're a tough team to fully grasp, but with the injuries, again, they're hard to fully figure out what they are, but they're closer to feels like playoffs than what are you right now, in my opinion. Atlanta drops one here, a team that early on in the season, I don't know if I ever put them in dark horse, but I certainly put them in feels like playoffs. I thought that they had some real good stuff, and they play a Patriots team tough here. They do. Patriots have played really good football. Ultimately, it was a missed extra point, but yeah, I mean, I had them in the what are you tier last week, and I think that's just the right tier for them. I think that's kind of where they belong. Next up is Baltimore, who, without Lamar Jackson, I really had a hard time figuring out where they should be, what's going on. I'm going to be very clear about what this tier means. I'm going to put them in feels like playoffs. And again, it feels like playoffs. It does not mean I think they will make the playoffs because of their record. It's tough. Will they make the playoffs? We'll see. I think that's very up in the air. But they feel like a playoff caliber team right now. So maybe that's the better way to phrase it. Feels like a playoff caliber team, but that's too wordy. So I'll just explain it. But I do think they feel like a playoff team with Lamar Jackson healthy. Again, I know it's just Miami, but they looked awesome against Miami. Chicago with Caleb Williams, hey, they pull off a victory. They really struggle at times in that game. So again, I've had them in the what are you tier, but they feel like they're closer to the solid tier than the what are you tier. So I think I was probably just too low on them last week. Again, they're finding ways to win games. They nearly found a way to lose that one, but they recover an onside kick, and that game does not look that weird. The defense did not play great, and that's happened a couple of times. But also, okay, T. Higgins is really good. Jamar Chase is really good. Those guys are really good. A lot of teams don't look great defensively against those two receivers, and Flacco played well. So give Caleb Williams a lot of credit for the plays he made. Ben Johnson was dialing up a lot of creative stuff here, and I thought Williams played really well. Not perfect, but really well. The Texans, who, I mean, part of it is what's the make of C.J. Stroud, who has a concussion, and sometimes you miss one game and you're ready to go for the next one. Sometimes you miss the rest of the season with something like this. We don't know. Obviously, the main thing you hope is that he's just okay, but from a football perspective, it's a really good defense. They were still in this game with Davis Mills, but I think C.J. Stroud means a lot to this team. So I think they're going to be what are you. I had them in solid previously. I think they're what are you with C.J. Stroud injured. And if Stroud is healthy, I'll put them back up into solid. That's kind of how I view them. Indianapolis, who I had put in Super Bowl contenders, I had been singing the praises of Indianapolis, and you know what? It's going to take more than that for me to knock them out. I'm being nice to the teams I already had in Super Bowl contenders so far, at least, because that was a weird 6 turnovers is crazy, and Pittsburgh seemingly does that to some teams. So this offense has been great. This defense has been great so far this season. This was their worst loss of the season. Against the Rams, they kind of gave that one away. This was their first loss of the season where they gave the ball away too much. But that's not going to happen again. You wouldn't think. So I'm not going to panic. They're still a really good team. They still could win the Super Bowl. The Rams continue to be really good, and you know what? Let's bump them up. I had them in dark horse. They've done enough now. This is a team that I've been a little bit reluctant, and it just there hasn't been a perfect week for me to be like, oh, yes, they absolutely deserve to be Super Bowl contenders. But at 6-2, I mean, they won their previous games 34-10, 35-7, and 17-3. That was the Ravens game without Lamar, 17-3. But that's their last 3 games prior to losing to the 49ers. They've beaten the Colts. They've had some impressive wins. I think this feels fair as they now play the tough stretch. 49ers, Rams, Buccaneers, Panthers have a winning record. Some tough games coming up here. But for a team that's 6-2 in a tough division, they can win it all. And Stafford's playing great. The Chargers, man, are they a weird team? I still think they feel like a playoff caliber team, but this is playing down to their competition. Again, you throw a pick 6 and then also you give up a special teams touchdown. You essentially gave the other team 14 points and were still able to win. It's the NFL. That's still the Titans are still an NFL team. So you have, the mistakes can't be happening like that. And if they're going to really be more than just a playoff team, they have to clean up those errors. So for now, that's where I have them. The Raiders, hey, you know what? I'll bump them up to scrappy. I think with Brock Bowers, they are scrappy instead of bad. I think there still are a ton of defensive issues, but Smith looked more competent. Like, their team was kind of built around Brock Bowers being awesome, and him being out for most of the season definitely has played a role in their issues. That's not their only issues, but that's definitely played a factor. So, sure, well, at least for this week, keep them in scrappy. For the Commanders, I mean, I had them in what are you? And I think I got to bump them down to scrappy at this point. Their defense is just atrocious, and I was critical of their really lack of urgency in trying to improve that this offseason, sort of assuming it would just get better with an extra year to gel, and it has not. The situation around Daniels looks worse, and, has he regressed a little bit? Perhaps. I think so. I also think, what's he supposed to do on some of these plays? I mean, all the 15-yard penalties that kept happening in that game. Seattle has a really good defense. Guys aren't getting open. There's quick pressure. I don't know. I mean, it's tough. It's a tough situation for Daniels. So I'm not going to put it all on him. I think it's just I don't think he's the issue. But also, last year, I felt like he was so good. Didn't matter what the issue was. They were having success. This year, that's just not happening. Kansas City, speaking of last year, I felt like no matter what they did, things would work out. Well, this year it hasn't. They are 5-4, and part of what we talked about when they got off to that slow start, they were 0-2. Also dropped one to Jacksonville in a game that kind of felt like they could have had. Part of what we talked about is, hey, they have a first place schedule and they're in a really good division. This is difficult now. They've set themselves up for failure. We're midway through the season. They are not in a playoff spot. I'm not going to keep them in top tier. I'm going to drop them to dark horse. And maybe I think people will argue in both directions. I think people will say, dude, they're the Chiefs, put them in the top tier just because of that alone. I get it. And they have looked really good prior to this. Dropping game against the Bills is no, it's no reason to panic. But I also just think that, listen, this is just as much where are we right now as it is predicting the future. And as of right now, the Chiefs continue to find ways to lose games right now, it feels like. And this wasn't finding ways to lose. They did not play as well as the Bills. I mean, they weren't able to get guys open consistently. It took a couple miracle plays from Mahomes to give them a puncher's chance at the end there, and then Mahomes threw the pick late, which took that chance away. Really, I mean, they still somehow had a Hail Mary opportunity, but realistically, that was over. And I thought that Maxwell Harrison did well. The Bills were able to cover the Chiefs in a way we haven't seen, and you do start to look at some of those Chiefs games where they were beating guys, or they were beating teams, but they were not necessarily they were beating teams badly, but they weren't necessarily beating good defenses badly. So you think about, the past 3 weeks, as good as the offense has looked, it's the Commanders defense, which stinks, it's the Raiders defense, which stinks, and it's the Lions defense, which was injured. So that's kind of something you have to look at. And then, they played well against Jacksonville, although there was the pick six in that game. So it's they haven't had a great game against a great defense. This was an opportunity for them to have a great game against a solid defense with Maxwell Harrison healthy, and weren't able to do it. So, again, they're still the Chiefs. It'd be insane to not keep them in top 2 tiers with what we've seen when things have looked on. But playing Denver, that's not next week, but in 2 weeks. They have the bye week next week, and then Denver. That's a big game all of a sudden. Denver's 2 games ahead of them, so we'll see. We'll see how that works. Although Denver does not have their bye, so they'll either be 1.5 or 2.5 games ahead of them once we get there. But very interesting with the Chiefs. Next up, the New Orleans Saints. Probably won't have to go that long with this team. They're not a very good football team as of yet. There's the weird thing with, trying to figure out which quarterback to play. They go with Tyler Shuck. Did not make too much of a difference here in this one. Offense still looks like the offense. I get it. You wanted to see if you could spark something, but ultimately, you did spend a 40th overall pick on him. See if he can play. Ultimately, Spencer Rattler, I don't think is a starter. I think he's maybe a solid backup. But, that's just it. These were different classes of opponents. Rams are better. It is what it is. The Giants here, who, again, last week I had them in the scrappy tier, and they didn't play horrible against San Francisco, but I think there's just not enough to keep them out of the bad tier. I just think that there's, again, this is an injured 49ers team. not being able to be competitive in this game. To be in the scrappy tier, you have to at least be staying competitive in some of these games. You get crushed by the good teams, but then when it's like an okay team, you're able to at least keep it competitive. 49ers are having a solid tier, but not able to keep that competitive. There's just not enough help for Jackson Dart right now. It's not, it's not their fault. They had good players that got injured, but what are you going to do? So, yeah, the Steelers, just when you think you had the Steelers figured out, they do something confusing. I had them in solid. Let's bump them up to feels like playoffs again. Why not? The turnover stuff is real. Again, are they better than just a playoff team? I don't think so. I think playoff team feels like the caliber of team they are. But Rodgers, again, didn't have his best statistical day, but made some plays when he had to. And Daniel Jones, been having a great season. They were able to make him not have a good day. I know turnover luck can be fluky, but it's partially good scheme and good strategy and pass rush and taking advantage of your opportunities when you get them and all that good stuff. So, yeah, they feel like a playoff team. The Denver Broncos, who, defense plays great. Offense, going up against, Houston is a really good defense. So I know that this wasn't the best offensive day by Denver. Ultimately, I think I'm still going to keep them in dark horse and not bump them up to Super Bowl contenders. Their record is certainly Super Bowl contenders, 7-2. It's a great record. It's just traditionally you need, in today's NFL, you need to be able to pass the ball down the field effectively to be a real contender. And while they've shown flashes of it, the Dallas game, they haven't done it consistently just yet. So splitting hairs takes a lot to be in the Super Bowl contenders tier. They are in the conversation. I am thinking about it a lot stronger than I have been. They play the Raiders on Thursday Night Football. I don't know if it'll be possible for them to bump up a tier just because if they blow out the Raiders, I'll probably just assume the Raiders stink. So that's kind of tough. Only so much you can do. But in 2 weeks, playing the Chiefs, if the Broncos win their next two or 9-2 when I've beaten the Chiefs, I can't imagine a scenario where I don't put them in Super Bowl contenders. I won't promise it just because I remember one time I was doing this years ago, and I think it was the Vikings. I'm like, if the Vikings win, I'll bump them up to Super Bowl contenders. And then they won, but I still didn't feel like I should, so I didn't. And then people were like, well, wait, why didn't you? You said you would. So no promises, but probably will. The Packers. Yeah, man, this Packers team frustrates me. They're like the Steelers. Just when I think I figure them out, they go and do something confusing. So I'm like, okay, they're back. Like, maybe they played a couple games too close to what you would like. They probably should have beaten the Cowboys instead of tied them. Definitely should have beaten the Browns. Probably should have won that Bengals game a bit more handedly, and the Cardinals game a little bit more handedly. But you know what? They blew out the Steelers. Like, a lot of these games have been on the right side of. And I don't think the Panthers are horrible, but like this Packers team, it's too inconsistent right now. So they're going to be dark horse, not Super Bowl contenders. So them and Kansas City drop down a tier. Again, can definitely get back on track. Monday Night Football against the Eagles, that's a real game. If they win that game, they'll probably jump back up to Super Bowl contenders. That's really fascinating with those two teams. But, Love's been inconsistent. He made some weird decisions. I think Love's had a really good season. This was not his best performance in this one, and ultimately it was not all his fault. There wasn't guys getting open consistently in this game. And again, Carolina covers well. I thought they played good defense. So let's talk about Carolina, who I had in What Are You? Let's bump them up to solid, right? I mean, I still don't know if I'm putting them, again, their record is 5-4. Their record is playoffs, kind of. It's close to playoffs. I think they played well. They play good defense. They just, again, similar to Denver, but just like almost like a diet Denver of like, they don't have the firepower offensively to be able to, I think, really go on a deep playoff run this season or anything like that. I don't think even the most optimistic Panthers fans will disagree with that take. But like, they've been a team that I've just been impressed with this season. And it feels like, again, Bryce Young had 102 passing yards, but I thought he played okay in this one. They run the ball really well. Like, Young did make the plays when he had to at the end there to ultimately get the victory. And then they play good defense. They cover well. A couple timely turnovers. Also, a very untimely turnover. They threw a red zone interception as well. But we're able to overcome it and beat the Packers. So, hey, and honestly, like if I forget who it was, the defensive back who just dropped that pass in the end zone, that could have been a potential pick six that would have completely changed things. So it was Mike Jackson. Mike Jackson had it and just dropped it. Could have been a pick six that would have put them up 14 and iced the game. So could have been even easier if you just catch a football. Not sure if it would have been a pick six. You would have had to beat an offensive lineman. Who knows? But had a good chance. The Bills are Super Bowl contenders, of course. Bills, have not played perfect week in and week out. You still think about that Atlanta game where Josh Allen just didn't play well. Very weird game there, but he has bounced back nicely. They also lost to the Patriots, but again, divisional matchup. Patriots are very good. Bills are very good. Really good stuff here from Josh Allen and the defense playing the way the defense did. That's the thing you want to look at. Because even I felt like last year, it was like Josh Allen made a few remarkable plays that got them over the top against Kansas City in the regular season. It felt like the Bills were... I think it's the first time I've looked at these two teams and been like, I think the Bills supporting cast outplayed the Chiefs supporting cast. Heading into the game, I locked up the Chiefs on the podcast because I'm like, I just think that Josh Allen will have to make more tougher shots in this game than Mahomes will. And it was the other way around. And so, that's kind of what tends to be the difference. Usually you're going to get great performances by both those two guys, and it's the supporting cast that's tipped in Kansas City's favor. In the regular season, sometimes it's just Mahomes, Mahomes threw a pick, what was it, last year, late, there's been that, those guys usually both play great, but Bills tend to beat the Chiefs in the regular season, 5th time in a row they've done that, but still an impressive win nonetheless. The Seahawks, speaking of impressive wins, what a performance that game was. 31 points in the first half, cooled off in the second half, but Seahawks are really good. I had the Seahawks in dark horse. If I bump up the Rams, I think I'm bumping them up as well. I just think they're a really good team. I think that they play really good defense, and also their offense has been a buzzsaw. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think on paper you're like, well, what about their secondary receiving options? But for now, it's working. It's kind of different guys each week, it feels like, but it's effective. It's working, and if it's if it's Torrey Horton who has to come through and make a play, he can do it. If it's we know Cooper Kupp will get back. If it's him, whatever. They're playing really good football. Finally, the New England Patriots, who take care of business, win a game maybe a little closer than you'd like against Atlanta. A win is a win. They were in dark horse. I see no reason to change it. They play Tampa Bay next week, 2 dark horse teams. We'll see if one of those can climb up a tier. But yeah, 6 teams I put in the Super Bowl contenders tier. That is the same amount as last week, but they're different. 6, not the same 6, because I had Green Bay and Kansas City in it last week, but both of them drop. But the Rams and the Seahawks, 2 NFC West teams, end up in the top tier. So yeah, that's where I have that. But those are my tier rankings for week 9. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.